I retired from MATC. Joined Milwaukee Public Schools as a speech pathologist.
What did you teach at MATC?
Psychology courses.
Oh, wow. See, that's something a lot of people may not know about the honor of Reader's Choice. They may just think that's just all you ever did was the bookstore. Some people may not know. They may not know the history. So, you know, and then you think about it too, like some of it's generational. You know, some of the young folks definitely may not know. So,
you know what I'd like to get to mention and talk about a little bit? Since you talk about education, this misdirection of closing the gap. The gap that needs to be closed is the teacher-student gap. It's not, we tend to, Milwaukee is so racially polarized. We look at too much. We look at everything, perhaps, in terms of black and white. And maybe ultimately that is it, but for conversational and for conversational purposes, for planning purposes, my thinking is we need to close the gap between student and teacher so that the teacher is more in tune with the student, and students drive by, drop in from Franklin, Mequon, and New Berlin, and so forth.
Yeah. Let's get into it. You ready, Josh?
Yep, ready.
Let's get into it. I don't know if these is on. Oh, they're not even plugged in. Where's my outlet for these, Jay? Yeah.
Would it be too disturbing not to have, what is the odor, the fragrance that I smell? Is that an incense?
I think so.
Is that an incense that's going?
Yep.
Burning? Would it be too much if I asked for it not to?
Oh yeah, I can.
I appreciate that. Smells, some strange reason, get into my throat.
Yeah.
I don't talk loud.
Yeah.
I don't talk loud, and then I don't know what happens to my throat.
I
I've always
understand.
been curious about that. Thank you.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning. We are live. Good morning. Welcome back to the Educational Arts Project. I'm your host each and every Thursday morning, VivaFidel, right here on 101.3 FM Milwaukee Radio. I'm chilling in the passenger seat. You know, Joshua Jones is holding it down behind the boards. We start each and every Thursday out by thanking all of our returning listeners. What's going on, y'all? Thanks for spreading the word. Thanks to everybody who's been checking out the archive episodes, all of the past guests, and everybody who's helped to keep the conversation moving right here on the Educational Arts Project. It's very, very much appreciated. And what's happening to all of our new listeners, everybody who's just tuning in, checking in for the first time. We get a lot of new listeners each and every week. We just get the momentum rolling, and this week is no sleeper episode. I want y'all to make sure y'all check out the archive episodes, though. That's truly, truly, truly important, so you can catch up and get up to speed on some of these conversations and the solution building that happens on the Educational Arts Project. And you can do that by checking out the Periscope feed, periscope.tv/VivaFidel, or the YouTube VivaFidel TV channel, and the rest of the social media networks. You can find me and some of the content and some of the work, you know. And today we're not even going to waste any time. We get right into it. I have a very special guest, very distinguished guest here today, and I'm honored to be able to introduce her to my listening audience. Some of you all may have heard of a very well-known establishment in the community here in Milwaukee called The Reader's Choice, a bookstore that's been here almost as long as I've been here. And so some of you all know about The Reader's Choice, and some of you have maybe seen it coming past, going down the street. And I want to introduce the owner, founder, proprietor, Miss Carla Allison. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Thank you for taking time out your day to join us.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation.
Thursday mornings
to be here.
Are very critical for everybody. I know 9 in the morning on a Thursday ain't easy for folks. Believe me, I know.
Well, your subject matter, arts, education, conversation on how to improve that, how to bring it more into the public is a good thing.
Thank you so much. And you know, your contribution as far as educating our community on a whole is not to be taken for granted a little bit, because your business, Reader's Choice, is much more than just a business. It is a fountain of information and a channel and a vessel in a lot of ways in the community for people to get in touch with information and authors from national perspectives, from international perspectives. And in Milwaukee, a lot of times you have to really dig for a certain amount of information, certain amount of knowledge, certain amount of history and heritage. We may not get it in schools. Unfortunately, a lot of folks ain't getting it at home. They're not getting it at church. And so one of the things that happens in this kind of environment is people go on a hunt for knowledge. People have a thirst and a quest for information to connect them back to something real, connect them back to the source of where they come from. So your contribution, you're just a pillar.
It's not Carla.
You know, I want to really give you and your husband, for that matter, the credit that you deserve, because for one, running a business for a substantial amount of years, it's not hard, but I mean, it's not easy, but then you have a very unique business. You're selling information and books, and that's not something, especially a lot of our people just go out and spend money on. Like, we may spend money on other things, you know, $20 here, $50 there. Like, the bookstore may not be the first 5 choices. So I just want to, you know, slow down and give y'all credit where credit is due. Being able to push information and consistently. I mean, there are not many black-owned bookstores in the country anymore. And at one time, our community understood the value of that placeholder in our community, of that value of that establishment in our community. There are not even a lot of black-owned radio stations in our communities nationwide, because at a certain point in time, we understood the value of these channels of communication, these gathering points of action or mobilization. And so, again, I don't want to understate it. I want people to understand. We're talking 28 plus years, right?
28 years, yes.
That's huge. That's huge.
Well,
Black business legacy right there.
It's owning a bookstore is a mission, and especially for 28 years, it's not. I learned over those years that it's not about selling books, but it is more about sharing information. And the other thing that I learned that I think that's quite important is the role of a bookstore in the community. So many people come in and it's just for conversation. And I say just for conversation. I think I should say a lot of conversation takes place. Mm-hmm. Some people object to that. Well, why don't you tell these people if they're not going to buy a book, why don't you leave? That's not what a bookstore does. We discuss books, and hopefully books will be purchased. But I truly learned that the function of a community bookstore is, in fact, to be a member of the community. If it's not making money, it's not a business. That belongs to a truly business type person, a corporation type person, or mentality. My bookstore, I always wanted it to be an instrument of the people and for the people. Excuse me, my mission statement. I worked on a mission statement before I ever opened a bookstore. And I knew, as you said, it's about information. I knew that I wanted my mission statement to reflect what you get from reading, what you get from books. Not only information, but inspiration, comfort, directions. There's so much that comes from you also said something that alluded to reading lets a person know that they're not alone. Whether it be fiction, whether it be history, religious reading, business, I think you're exactly right. Reading does serve that function. Books serve that function, particularly when there are so many local authors. They're sharing their story. Sometimes it's clearly a therapeutic work, but that therapy reaches more than the author. It reaches the reader.
Absolutely. Let's take it back to that moment when you were like mapping out that mission statement. What made you want to even open a bookstore? Is it something that you dreamed of as a young lady? Is it something that you were raised around? Where did the aspiration even come from?
Well, certainly I was raised around books.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised around reading. My father always had at least 2 papers. In fact, I'd say he had 3. The Milwaukee Journal in the evening, the Milwaukee Sentinel in the morning, and the Chicago Tribune later in the evening, and especially on the weekend. I wanted to open a bookstore because there was not a bookstore in our community. There were places that sold books, but they also sold more earrings and more t-shirts and incense, that kind of thing, rather than books. So I wanted to have a store that was strictly a bookstore. So when I first opened, I wouldn't even sell cards. I didn't sell cards, I didn't sell magazines. I wanted people to know clearly that it was a bookstore. I remember early on in the planning, I mentioned it to one of my doctors, and he laughed and said, "Well, you don't want to make any money, do you?" Another friend of mine in Dallas who was co-owner of the bookstore, a very popular bookstore there, Black Images Bazaar, she said, "Whatever you do, don't quit your day job and don't plan a cruise." And I found that to be especially useful. I kept my day job, so I was not dependent on selling books. The function of my bookstore, of a community bookstore, is to serve the community. I'm no longer surprised when people call and ask me, where is a particular funeral being held? Or do I know where such and such a thing is in the city? Where can I get this? Where can I get that? Well, there is a lot of pages that people can consult, but I've calmed down and I've come to understand that is part of the function of the community bookstore.
And people understand that. You must get a lot of information, and people understand that that's a centralized point, so they think, hey, let me go holler at Mama Carla and see if I can get closer. That's critical, and you're absolutely right. The role that a few of our businesses take on become more than just the purpose of making a dollar. They become almost a refuge in the community for a lot of people. They become a safe space, a sanctuary almost, especially when you've brought in authors and people who publish books from different places who are giants in the literary world or in the cultural world. And so then it becomes even more of a point of interest because, again, in Milwaukee, that's not something you see every day. That's not something that happens every week. And so it becomes something that people anticipate and they look forward to, that they know your establishment is going to host something meaningful that they won't be able to get anywhere else or any other place.
I've had many well-known, nationally known authors in the Reader's Choice, and I've enjoyed bringing them to the Reader's Choice. I learned, it's always a learning experience, and one of the things that I've learned from observation is when authors typically go to the chain bookstores, they have a format that they follow. The author does. And people are very orderly and polite, and they sit in their seat and they stand in line, and they are an audience. They do not participate. And as I observed that, to me it seemed very, very sterile and disconnected. And I thought, this is not what we do. This is not what our community needs. Our community does not see Gloria Naylor, does not see J. California Cooper, many of the other popular authors. And I thought, we need to talk. We need to talk to these people and not just have them stand at a podium and read their pre-written spiel and then sit down and sign books. We're going to have a conversation. And I'm sure that Reader's Choice was the first place that, quote, conversations took place. I had a very, very old dear friend who handled it better than anyone I have seen. And that's Dr. Clark. And he would interview, he'd ask a question, and just sit back and let the person answer. And as a result of his questions, one of the things that I saw over the years was that authors will reveal themselves. They will get very personal. And afterwards, I've said to several of them, did you really mean to say that? And their answer was, without failure, their answer was, I really didn't, but I just felt so comfortable. I felt comfortable with you. I felt comfortable with the interviewer. And so Hakeem Mahabudi would end up telling us some very personal things about himself and his mother. Derek Bell revealed some political ideas that I thought, my goodness, I didn't know he thought that. So the conversations started at the Reader's Choice, and it really opened up the author to the audience. There was a time for questions, thus revealing even more information. In fact, in the early days, one of the standard questions was, how long did it take you to write this book? Well, I'm very pleased to say that it moved from that kind of question, because that's a personal, self-fulfilling kind of, I need information from you about writing, how can I do this? It moved from that to more informative, more educational, more philosophical, more social, community-oriented issues. The questions were issue-based and not, what can I learn that I can take home? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, it represented a growth of the audience, of the community. So I'm pleased that I was able to bring the number of authors to the city. When I think of the pictures with Nikki Giovanni and so many people, I'm going to have a celebration on Saturday, and I hope to put together some of those pictures, not even some, all of those pictures. Teju Malak, the community probably knows him, has a picture with Francis Cress-Welsing. I don't know that he has a copy of that. So if he's listening, if somebody knows him, tell Teju to stop by and get his picture.
I heard that.
There are people that I don't even know who have taken pictures with a number of authors who've been to the store. And do feel free to come by, identify yourself, get your picture. I don't want anybody else to get it. I want you to get it.
Wow.
Get the picture that's yours.
So I want to make that announcement just so people know, this Saturday at the Reader's Choice on King Drive and Brown Street, right on the corner of King Drive and Brown, from 9 to 5, there will be a final blowout, clearance, liquidation sale. That means everything must go. That means come get some information, some books, some posters, some art, some cards. It's a lot more than books at this point.
Absolutely. I want furniture to go, bookshelves.
We got a lot that needs to get out of the place, okay? So if you want to come get children's books, fiction books, Black history books, information about business, about education, don't sleep on this sale, because it's a blowout like none other. And also, you can come and meet Miss Carla Allison, her family, and some of the other people that have been invested in the community, making Reader's Choice a reality. So that's this Saturday, the 8th, all day, 9 to 5, no excuse, on the corner of King Drive and Brown. Come and show some love and pick up a book for your family, for your children. Come pick up. I'm definitely, I've been spreading the word to let folks know that there are some awesome children's books at the Reader's Choice. And, it's not easy sometimes to find children's books that reflect our community and our culture. And it's like a lot of other things. If you want it, you got to dig for it. You got to really know where to look, but you got to look and look and look and search until you find it. You go online, order it offline, and all that. But you ain't got to do that. You can come out this Saturday, and you can get some classics from some, very well-known titles to local authors and self-published authors, and you will have actually a local author there on site.
Yes, Pastor Lovelace Redmond will be there. I'm thinking of Wanda Bayless. I haven't publicized that, but I'm hoping that she will be available and be there. She too has an incredible book. Lovelace, of course, went to kindergarten with Lovelace.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
Excuse me for calling him Lovelace instead of Pastor Redmond. But his book is spiritual. And
Is it fiction? Fiction-based?
it is. How can I call it fiction when it's really scriptural based?
Like a scriptural novel, something like that?
Yes, okay, that's a good genre. That's
Sure.
a
That
new
is a
genre.
good-
We'll
that
call
is-
it
Did I just make up a
scriptural.
genre? I need to corner that market right quick. Because a lot of that stuff really like science fiction to me. If you're talking about I won't get into that. But spiritual novel, wow. Was that what I call it? I missed it.
Scriptural novel.
So then
Yes.
you can take scriptural experiences.
Because it's loaded with
Because
scripture.
it's loaded with, okay, good. I'm on to something here.
There is a genre that's called religious fiction.
Uh-huh.
And the pattern for that is people live very worldly, very street-wise lives. They do anything and everything that their mom told them not to do. And somewhere towards the end, they see the light and they turn to God. And so they are transformed, they are redeemed, and so forth.
So we want a lot of the local authors that have experienced relationships with the Reader's Choice to come out and show support as well. If you had your publication in the store, you owe it to the Reader's Choice to come and show some love, pay some tribute, and all of the other local people who know about the store and the legacy of the store. I think it's just important you just come and say hi and come say thank you to the Reader's Choice, if nothing else. There's people who listen to this program from all over the country and all over the world. Is streaming online, so we talk about it on the micro level as far as Milwaukee, right on that corner of King and Brown. But on a bigger level, again, we appreciate what the Reader's Choice represents on a bigger level, because our history and the preservation of our culture and the informational highways and pathways that are in the form of our scholars, in the form of our giants, our cultural leaders and thought leaders over time. It's just something that's so important, and we need to get back to valuing that level of scholarship and information, arts and culture. That's part of what the Educational Arts Project encompasses. So again, this Saturday at the Reader's Choice on the corner of King Drive and Brown Street, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm going to keep emphasizing that so you all can come out and support and pick up some good information and literature. So I want to switch gears a little bit. You talked about some local authors. What's some of your experiences with up-and-coming authors, self-published authors, people that come in your store and they say, hey, I want to put my book in your store, or I'm about to release a book, or just talk a little bit about that process from behind the cash register. So I've had authors here, people sharing their books, artists, musicians, people sharing their produced works and things of that nature. But just from a business owner aspect, it could be, you can give us some tips to some of my potential authors or current people working on their publication.
Well,
like myself.
Okay. As a former classroom teacher, I didn't encourage a lot of term papers because they were not well written. So the first thing I would tell an aspiring author is, I'm not going to struggle to read your book. That means Be sure it is well edited. Be willing to pay someone. Be willing to pay someone. I'm not going to say it again, but that's needed. You've got to do that. Readers are not going to struggle. Milwaukee is not a literary town.
Give us an example of a literary town. Where's a literary town?
Look at any city that has 2 or 3 newspapers. That is a sign.
Gotcha.
That is your first sign of a literary town or city, because people are reading and people want to read more. And so there's more than one newspaper. Milwaukee clearly is not. I'm bothered with a newspaper that consists of 8 pages, and we're calling this a newspaper. I kind of don't think so. The school system is not producing strong readers, critical readers. Those who do come out probably would have come out at the same level if they had not gone to school. It is what it is. So it's not a strong literary city. People are not going to struggle to read a poorly written book. So that's the first thing, and probably the most important thing that I would say that's necessary. Self-publishing is made very easy today. There are any number of computer programs that will allow you to produce a book. There are editing packages that come with that, and you can decide whatever it is that you want to pay for. I've read there are some local people who have beautiful, absolutely beautiful books, well edited, grammatically correct, everything. Storyline floats smoothly. So there are 2 kinds of editing that you want to consider. One is just that grammar and punctuation kind of editing. That's basic. That can be done by someone who knows that. And then the other part of editing is your story coherent? Are you in fact sequencing events? Are you dropping in unnecessary people? Terry McMillan, for example, excellent writer, absolutely fabulous storyteller. She has a sister. I'm thinking she's a younger sister. And sometimes younger sisters want to do what the older sisters do. Younger sister writes a book, so I read it, and I'm absolutely amazed at how nonsensical this is. Nothing made sense. Dropped people in without introducing them, so there's no background on the person. Please tell us why this person shows up to do what they're doing and what's going to be the result. You can't have a character create havoc and then not explain the results of that. So there's a story editor that reads your material just to be sure that it makes sense.
Let's start there, people. Take a couple steps back.
Those are the 2 basic editors.
Run it through some editorial filters before you put it out into the public, before you even let too many eyes on it. I think that is very critical. And a lot of times artists, creators are in their own focused worlds, and so to come up for air and let other people chew up and spit out your works ain't the easiest thing for a lot of people, but it's necessary, especially to have it market ready. And then just what's one of the things that you would say is another, because you kind of alluded to my next question about, you said like there's a level of authorship in Milwaukee that's pretty up there, where there's some great, you've seen some great books and publications come out of Milwaukee, and there's some other ones that may have not been ready.
Right. There definitely are some that are out there that are a struggle, and if people buy them, they buy them because you know them. And that's a pretty slick gimmick too. The more names of local people that you put in, people will buy that book, almost regardless of what you price it at, because people want to see their name in print. There's some books that are confessional, Therapeutic books, you know that the person went through a horrible experience. Maybe it's instructional. There's one lady in particular who has written a book that has sold very well, and I say that because it sold for a long time. I've carried her book for maybe 10 years.
Wow.
Nobody's buying 7 copies at one time, but people consistently ask for her book.
Wow.
Has a lot to do with human trafficking. That is, maybe it flows and slows or whatever, but that is a reality in Milwaukee, and she confesses, she describes how her life came to be wrapped up in that, or caught up in that lane, so to speak. So people want to know about that. Her book is instruction. It's both confessional and instructional.
What resources are available locally that you may be familiar with for authors, people that potentially want to do, their own publication? Maybe it's a magazine, maybe it's a book, maybe they want to tell their own testimony in book form. What resources are you? Because I'm sure people ask all the time, like, how can I get on that road to putting my book on your shelf? Are there any go-to resources that you're aware of that you could share for authors or interested people that are going to be publishers?
I would tell, because I can't name just one, I would tell people to simply go to the computer and type in Google self-publishing, and you'll get no fewer than half dozen, maybe as many as 2 dozen. So it's an industry.
Yeah. So go to Google, in other words. You thought you was going to get some special secret sauce. No. Go to Google.
No. Yeah. It's that.
Do your
That's
homework.
fairly simple.
Yeah, I get it. And a lot of people now understand that there is a do-it-yourself path, if you will, to that. And there's a lot of ways that people, our younger generation is even looking into how do they create their blogs, how do they create their digital media as well as print, because I don't think print is going away or going out of demand anytime soon.
So
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And so a lot of people, especially in the print industries, they try to steer away from it now, and they're trying to, make things a little bit more digitally accessible, which is cool as well. But I think still people will always want that book or that newspaper in their hand, and I know I'm that way still. I'll print some stuff out before I just sit there and read 30 pages on the computer. I'd rather have it in black and white in front of me, so I can write on it and I can take my notes and have my fun.
There are some authors who will call me and ask, how do I get my book on your shelf? My first response is always, send me a copy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, you can read it on the computer. No, I will not read it on the computer. My eyesight is not such that I'm interested in doing that. And the other piece of that is you have to demonstrate that you believe in your book. And so you invest in yourself by printing the book. Be prepared to hand the book, to at least hand the book to the person that you want to sell it for you. And that's somewhat akin to knowing the difference between a publisher and a printer. And it does boggle my mind a bit that that distinction is not clear.
So let's edify my audience. Let's talk about that. What's the difference between a publisher and a printer?
A printer prints and will print what you hand them.
Regardless.
And regardless of what you hand them, they will print it, and that's the end of that. And so when you get your book back, and it's in book form, and it reads like, what in the world is this? It's what you gave them, because they're printers. That's
and on
what
the other
they do.
hand, a publisher.
On the other hand, a publisher is going to assume responsibility that for your book, in both in its form, its content, and marketing. So every local writer wants to, or self-published writer, I should say, every self-published writer wants to move to that level that a publishing house is going to produce their book, because then you get your check. When you hand over that manuscript, they hand over a check. And they assume responsibility for marketing. You will see your book advertised in the magazine on the airplane. You will see your book advertised in the publishing industry, in the book industry. Now, for you to self-publish your book and then buy some space to have it printed, to have an ad to advertise, that's a whole different matter.
So just some of those basic things are very critical steps that people need to just do some self-education on, and get a clear understanding of how the industry works, or how the patterns in the industry can change, and just think about what you need. And then I also over communicate, or I try to reemphasize to a lot of my audience and a lot of the youth I work with how many other pathways for income there are just in that small conversation. Somebody's getting paid for editing, so you may be a great writer and you love reading and literature, but you may just be that person that can sit with other people's manuscripts and drafts and edit, and be that person that gets money before anything hits the shelves. Just being that wise about the different demands and the needs and the different gaps that need to happen in the process of concept to completion. There's a lot of possibilities in there. So just like with music or film or art, literature and books, it's the same idea, where a lot of times we should stop and slow down and talk about these things, so a lot of our talented young people, and adults for that matter, can understand how to use their skill sets and in an independent way, but also make themselves marketable to an entire industry they may have never even considered.
I think that's so important. That's exactly right. And it brings to mind two examples. I don't want to mention a lot of different authors, but one that stands out to me is Richard Williams, the father of Venus and Serena. His book is written, quote, with, a professional writer. So that with person could be the person who has that skill set of writing. The other example...
Is that like, for example, I don't know because we weren't there, but is that like Mr. Williams just having a conversation and the other person typing away? And I've seen, a lot of books from personalities or people who have names, and that's how they're delivered. With. You blowing up here. You hot in these streets. You hot in these streets. It's going down Saturday, 9 to 5. Everybody's blowing up her line trying to get the details about this blowout sale that's happening at the Reader's Choice on the corner of King Drive and Brown. Or either that, or they're blowing you up telling you they hear you on the radio and they want to give you a shout out and all that. 101.3 Milwaukee Radio. This is the pulse of the community right here, the Educational Arts Project. If you just joined us, I have the owner and the founder of the Reader's Choice here with me, Ms. Carla Allison. And we're just talking a little bit about the business of books, the process of publishing and creating and writing, and then also, again, the celebration that will happen this Saturday as a final tribute to all the great work and the investment that you all have made into the community here in Milwaukee. And you talked about classroom education. You talked about being a teacher. Was that the day job that you kept when you started?
Most definitely.
Okay. So you taught different levels in schools?
I have. I have been from kindergarten, first grade as a speech pathologist to college.
That's awesome. We talk a lot about on this program. I talk to young artists and professionals, and we talk about parenting, quite honestly. We talk about how do classroom teachers who are parents, what information do they have for parents? What information do they have for teachers? We just try to help build solutions and have good conversations about, like, what should you do if you have a little talented child in the corner and all they want to do is write and read, and they're in a, what do you do with that child who needs that extra motivation? Or what do you do with that parent who doesn't know what to do with that child who's inclined to books and just really into art or illustration? And so just from a classroom perspective, I guess you could say, what's some of the ways that we could help to encourage, especially we're talking about early childhood development, help to encourage parents to make reading more of importance and more of value in our,
Read
especially young parents.
Have books in the house. Have books in the house. Have reading materials in the house. Your CD collection is not as awesome as you think it is. It's certainly not as important as you think it is. In my day, we probably thought albums were important, and we wanted to show off how many different albums we have. I would tell you to have books, have reading materials, have magazines, have different forms of the printed word readily available in your house. Have some plaques. Have posters that are not posters about people, but they're posters that carry a message, carry a poem, carry 2 or 3 different quotations, but have something to read in your home.
That's
And
awesome.
then as far as the classroom is concerned, I think there are 2 things that are necessary: creativity and caring. If the teacher, we teach people who are important to us. One of the, I retired from MATC. I've taught at Milwaukee Public Schools, MATC, Cardinal Stretch, and UWM. So I've kind of made the rounds in Milwaukee as far as education is concerned. And what I am convinced of is if the people in front of us are important to us, then it's important to us to teach them. My last 3 years, easily my last 3 years at MATC, aside from teaching the subject matter, I very often spoke to the students of my dependence, my coming dependence on them to be competent and to be morally safe for me, so that when I take my prescription to wherever I take it, I want to know that the person is going to put all 30 pills in there and not 27. I want to know that the person is going to put the correct medication in there. When we as educators understand that we're looking at people in front of us who are going to make decisions that affect the quality of our lives, we'll do better. We will do better. When we have people driving in from areas that they could not find 10 people of color in that town, when they drive into the city of Milwaukee, I'm just reluctant to believe that their commitment to produce as strong a citizen capable of reading, critical thinking, decision making, morally stand up as it is for those kids in their hometown. So whether they're driving in from Watertown, Grafton, New Berlin, Wauwatosa, wherever it might be, I just don't think that it's reasonable for me to believe that the Milwaukee children population is as important to them as those children in New Berlin, Grafton, Tosa, so forth. That's the gap that needs to be closed. When the teacher-student gap is closed, the academic gap will close. And you can come back to that, but I wanted to pick up on one more educational piece in terms of business in the arts. Everybody can't be on stage, and everybody can't be an author. So that very strong writer who sits with, by the way, I have a lot of interruptions because after 28 years, I've seen a lot in that bookstore. Milwaukee has some very famous or popular, strong people who are well in their 80s and 90s. Their story is being written by, quote, the other. Okay? By the other. And so I think that's something that we should be doing ourselves, because we're here and we know those people. And it should not be, the work of writing that person's life should not be a doctoral assignment. So if somebody's going to UWM, going to Cardinal Church, going somewhere, Alverna, wherever it might be, and they're getting a PhD because they're sitting next to a black person, a historical black person in Milwaukee, and writing their story. Now it's like this, it's similar to the slave narratives. On one hand, you will read a book where the slaves are saying, oh, I was so happy and my master was great. Well, for a slave, for an enslaved person to say that, don't you wonder who is he talking to? And then the enslaved person who says it was horrible, it was a difficult life, he was a brutal person. Don't you wonder who that person was talking to? How can we get two very different narratives from people who experience the same situation? It depends on who you're talking to. So that makes the case for us to write our own story and sit with that person and help them tell their story. Going back to the person on stage, I have a sister who was principal of School of the Arts back in the 70s, at least the 80s, during the 80s. And she often commented on the fact that she couldn't get the children of color to understand that it's very, very necessary to have people behind the stage, behind the curtain. That's who is important also in producing that play. Everybody can't be on stage. Everybody can't sing the solo. That's why it's called a solo. But everybody can't be the main person. Everybody is not the drummer. But we do need people behind the scenes. So it's talent, it's skills, but it translates into a business.
Yeah. I tell my students a lot. There's a lot of people who make Beyonce possible.
Exactly.
You don't have to be Beyonce, trust me.
Exactly.
Believe that. And they wouldn't even be able to be themselves and get on that stage if it weren't for a great, strong team of people who are very well employed to make that possible.
Exactly.
And that's a very critical thing. And I always give big shout out to all the people behind the scenes of this radio station who help make it possible, who help keep these airwaves hot so I can come in on Thursdays and talk my talk with my guests. You may not hear them on the radio. You may hear me and the other voices, but behind the scenes, we appreciate all the people who help pull all the plugs and cross the T's and dot the I's and make it possible. We appreciate that.
He's got machinery over there that I wouldn't begin to know what to do with. So absolutely.
Yep, hitting them buttons. And you touched on a lot, and I knew you would, and I appreciate your wealth of information. As you were talking, I'm curious from your perspective, who are some elders, who are some pillars in our community? And I'm kind of putting you on the spot, or putting it on the spot.
Yes,
I don't know,
right.
but whose story should we be thinking about telling here in Milwaukee that people may not even be considering or thinking about? Who are some like that? And from your point of view, who are some personal people or stories that need to get told to the world from Milwaukee? Besides yours.
No, not mine. I don't know which one to mention first. One is one of my sisters. So I'll just leave it at that.
In no particular order. No particular order, no
Okay.
favoritism or competition.
No
You're
particular
just putting
order.
it out there. Yeah.
Clara knew.
Okay.
Because she was on the school board. She was on the school board during one of I think the first and only strike that Milwaukee Public Schools experienced. She has a lot of history relative to education. Some of the old guard school board members that she worked with.
Okay.
I think a conversation with her would be very, very worthwhile. Absolutely, Val Phillips. Somebody needs to write her story very soon.
Yeah.
And it needs to be someone who knew her when she was not an altar person.
That's real.
Someone who knew the relationship between she and her husband and how absolutely supportive he was. A little aside, I've been told by several people that my husband and I remind them of Val Phillips and her husband. People don't know him because he transitioned so many years ago. But the Reader's Choice would not be in existence for 28 years if it were not for Robert Allison.
Wow.
I taught and he held down the store. But when I retired, he retired. And so for the past 10 years, nobody has been in that store, hardly, but me. He comes through every now and then, but yeah. But those are two people that I would certainly say.
I'm surprised. Well, I'm not surprised, I guess, but I kind of, I don't know, I maybe would have thought there was a book or some sort of information about Val Phillips already out. I really,
No.
No. That is definitely a great story waiting to be told, waiting to be shared.
In fact, there is, she did do, like, someone did, like a video of her, and it's been presented at different programs and so forth. That's the kind of work that I'm saying is done as part of an academic assignment. I do believe, and I'm saying it needs to be done. These stories need to be told from our perspective. And by the way, that's fundamental for me. Absolutely. For the Reader's Choice. It's a bookstore about us, for us, and I do not apologize for that. I don't know how it could have been. Well, it just would not have been anything else from me. So I think the stories of Val Phillips, the stories of Clara New, the stories of Reuben Harpel, I think those stories have to be told
from within.
From within. People who knew and genuinely understood, cared about them. I think that's
I often think
where it is.
The family should take hold of those stories and keep them living in that way as well. You know, like a great-granddaughter or great-grandsomeone who can capture that family history and put it out there from a family way, you know.
Well, I agree. And as soon as we can persuade our grandchildren to connect to, quote, old stuff, people, things, ideas, maybe that can happen.
Well, that's good. And I take, you know, that's why I was excited coming up here this morning, because I was thinking to myself, and I said, wow, this may be like, I don't know, I take that back, but you are probably, I've had an elder on the show before, but I think you may be my second elder. Everyone else is in my range or maybe a little younger. And I was just excited because I said, you know, this is important for that very reason, to start to tell these stories and share these stories from a different perspective, and also just to literally make that connection, like you said, to give that connection, because
absolutely,
we have some students that will be coming out Saturday from True School to help volunteer, put in some work this Saturday, July 8th, at the Reader's Choice Bookstore, Martin Luther King Drive and Brown, right on the corner, 9 to 5. It's the big blowout sale. And I was telling them a little bit about the Reader's Choice Bookstore, and you know, for some of them, bookstores are far removed from their reality. And so just getting them to understand how important it is for us to pass our stories down and letting them know you're going to pass your story down one day too. You may not be thinking about that right now, but at some point you're going to want to preserve your legacy and tell your story to your children or your grandchildren. You're going to talk about what happened when you were in your teenage. You're going to be talking about these years to some little kids one day. And you know, and they were sort of fascinated by the idea. And we use art and music to help young people understand how to use their talents to tell their narrative, to change their reality, to create their own story, to find their own voices. And it's a process, you know. It's not something that clicks or happens instantly for a lot of young people. Some young people just get it because they was raised around it and they was raised in it purposefully. But to be able to have our young people connect in a real tangible way to the wisdom of the elders, even the wisdom of the ancients, is critical. And that's really like the foundation of what we do here at the Educational Arts Project. So again, I thank you for coming and sharing some of your story and sharing. And I know we could really talk for hours. Maybe, are you leaving Milwaukee once y'all close? I'll just ask on the air, just so everybody get this on the record.
Sometimes.
Okay. Sometimes she'll be in and out. The community will
Right.
still have access to you, maybe sometimes.
To me, maybe sometimes.
Okay. I did get out of her off the air that, you know, there is a book that she has written that has not been published. I will say it on the air out loud. So maybe you'll have some time and space to refine that and get that.
I really do think that I'm going to write. That's part of my plan. That's
awesome.
Part of what I will do
Awesome.
is write. For children especially. I want to mention, by the way, there are several books that are nothing but pictures for children, and it's used as a language development tool. And so it encourages children to tell their own story. And every child is going to tell a different story from the same picture. A single child will tell a different story from the same picture. Depends where they're at emotionally.
So you give us a sneak peek into your book series?
Absolutely.
That was a sneak peek. Y'all got it right here first, the Educational Arts Project. I'm your host, VivaFidel, and once again, I want to thank everybody who supported the Reader's Choice over the past 28 years. I want to thank the Allison family for making it a reality and offering so much to the community. This Saturday, you can come and say thank you. You can come and make a purchase. Say thank you by making a purchase. How about that? And then it's a blowout sale, so things will be discounted. You can get a bulk of books, children's books, family books, artwork, and more. 9 to 5 this Saturday. I'm signing out. I'll be back in the passenger seat, hanging out the window, chopping it up with my folks next week. All right, y'all? Peace.
Thank you. You're fabulous. I hope I can join you another time. Here and there and wherever coffee is served and wherever a good sandwich is served. It's great talking to you.
Thank you.
Because I look forward to Saturday to meeting your people.
Yeah.
I wish my sister, who was the principal of School of the Art School, talked with them. And that thing about the behind the scenes, I remember we went to New York and saw a play, and I was much younger, could really walk and run at the same time probably. And so after the play, I took off, went down, ran down the alley, stood by the stage door. And the people who came out first were all these technicians from behind the scenes, you know. And so many of them came out and so long darn. So you have as many people behind the scenes as you do on the stage. And my sister just lamented how she couldn't get the black students to understand there is money to be made behind the scenes.
Half the time, them folks making more money than the people that's selling seats on stage. They're making it because they make it possible.
It was quite something to learn, to see that. And all the people who were coming out, what was that? It wasn't Ladies in Blues, it was that play that's so popular. The Three Women, the Supremes.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, y'all was awesome.
Well.
Maybe radio.
He is so enjoyable. I was just talking to him, telling him, I hope I can get to talk with him again, wherever they serve coffee and